Welcome to CSIS Online. The way we bring you events is changing, but we'll still present live analysis and award-winning digital media from our Dracopoulos Ideas Lab. All on your time, live or on demand. This is CSIS Online.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jane Nakano. I'm Senior Fellow with the Energy Security and Climate Change Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And I am very pleased today to welcome a great panel of industry and private sector voices, experts, to join me. There's been a lot of attention on hydrogen. I mean, hydrogen is a very versatile source of energy. And there have been quite a few growing number of government strategies that really, map out how some of the major economies around the world see hydrogen as not only, key means to decarbonize their economy, but then also to perhaps sustain or further grow their industrial competitiveness. Also, there's been a lot of, I think, discussion on some of the technical issues or technical challenges. Also, a lot of focus on the further requirement for research and innovation. But the third, I think, point that probably, in my view, is explored is how many of the key industry players are viewing potential for hydrogen economy, and what are some of the experiences that they're having, also some of the insights as we try to scale the hydrogen economy around the world. So I am very pleased that we're gathered today with the cooperation from the Japan House in Los Angeles. And so let me, before I introduce our great set of panelists, let me first turn to Yuko Kaifu. Ms. Kaifu is the president of the Japan House LA. Before joining Japan House in 2016, actually, she's had a number of really interesting, fascinating career positions, both in the public and private sectors, including the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan. Also, a lot of nonprofit work as well as private sector work. I'm so pleased to introduce everyone to this great opportunity. And so first, let me turn to Yuko for brief welcome remarks.
Thank you, Jane, for a very kind introduction. Hello, everyone. It is a great pleasure and privilege for Japan House Los Angeles to be able to work with the Center for Strategic and International Studies to make this webinar happen. As you may know, Japan House Los Angeles, or Japan House as a whole, is a public diplomacy initiative launched by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan a few years ago with 3 global locations: Sao Paulo, London, and Los Angeles, and Los Angeles being the only one presence in the entire North America. We showcase various aspects of Japan, ranging from art and culture to architecture, fashion, design, film, business, food, and public policy. And public policy program like the one that we're presenting today is definitely our priority area. Today, we're delighted to feature one of the most important topics for all of us and to highlight efforts to realize a hydrogen economy. It is very timely as the COP26 summit in Glasgow reached an agreement calling on governments to step up their efforts to slash their carbon dioxide emissions. We have enormous challenges ahead of us, but hydrogen energy is definitely part of the solution to realize that carbon-free global economy. And I really appreciate Jane and the CSIS for leading the efforts to organize such a valuable program and timely one with distinguished speakers today. I hope all of you would enjoy the program, and I'll be back in the audience and looking forward to hearing the discussions today. So without any further ado, Jane, back to you.
Thank you so much, Yuko, for a wonderful welcome. And it's really interesting to be really reading about all these developments. But there's this whole I think realizing the hydrogen economy takes a lot of different types of stakeholders. And today we wanted to feature some of what's happening on the end use application side. And we have three wonderful speakers to help us do that, highlight some of these private sector insights. And the first is Bill Elric. He's the executive director of the California Fuel Cell Partnership. And I'm really excited because I think based in Washington, I know that there's a lot happening in California, especially when it comes to fuel cell, electric vehicles. But I personally, would be interested in hearing much more about, certainly what's happened in California, but then also would love to hear what Bill needs to say about how, how the prospect or future of fuel cell vehicles may look like for the rest of the United States. So he'll go first, and then he'll be followed by Izumi Kai, who's the president of the JERA Energy America. And JERA is one of the leading companies in Japan, but certainly around the world, doing a lot of LNG business. But within Japan, JERA has some efforts going on to introduce hydrogen in the form of ammonia in a power generation sector. So I'm very delighted to have him here and tell us a little more about JERA's experience there, and what are some of the things that we might be learning from that experience that may actually benefit many other economies that are interested in hydrogen usage. And last but not least, we're joined by Toru Sugiura from Toyota Tsusho America. He's the senior manager. And I'm also very excited because I think Toyota Tsusho is one of the leading companies looking at the hydrogen sort of ecosystem. And particularly, Toru brings with them some of the insights into the current effort that's happening in LA. For example, at the Port of LA, there's an effort to green the port operations. So I'd be very much interested in hearing how that's going and how that could be replicated at many of the ports around the world. So without further ado, let me turn to Bill.
Great, excuse me. Thank you so much for the opportunity and really CSIS's leadership to bring us all together, some old and new friends. So I'm looking forward to today. I don't have any slides. I just want to run through some quick things around California and the US. For those who don't know the California Fuel Cell Partnership, we were originally focused as a California-focused public-private partnership, and we're working on becoming a national nonprofit early next year. Our focus is on transportation and building the hydrogen economy for light and heavy-duty applications. We bring together government, vehicle manufacturers, energy providers, and others all together to create that opportunity. And the way we do that is we work on establishing the right market conditions for success, winning over the hearts and minds of customers and decision makers, and really trying to be that trusted resource for all. And that includes everything over the last 20 years, facilitating codes and standards, engaging stakeholders to work collaboratively towards these ends, developing common visions and strategies, and really to identify the various challenges and obstacles to market development, and then working collectively to resolve them. I mentioned we started this 20 years ago, really focused on the light duty side when government and industry realized there was an opportunity here and they needed to work collaboratively to get to, could this work? At the beginning, the first few years was really core R&D, can the technology work? Soon after that, we were working on the first demonstrations of vehicles and stations, and that was really, could it be a commercial success? And then finally, probably 6 years or so ago, we actually launched the market, the retail market, the first retail oriented, which is different than most parts of the world working on fleets. That had to do with some of the regulations we had in place we wanted to fulfill and achieve, put the first stations and vehicles into use with everyday people. So today we have over 10,000 light duty fuel cell vehicles on the road. We have about 50 retail stations throughout California, located primarily at existing gasoline stations where people are used to driving. We have over 100 stations in development now, some really big advances in the last year or two towards building out that infrastructure. And it's not just light duty. We've been working with fuel cell buses for years. There are over 50 of them in service now with millions of miles of service and growing every day. And we're starting to get the first fuel cell truck demonstrations up and running. So again, we launched it 6 years ago. Now we're transitioning from market launch to scaling up to create that normal marketplace so the average person can go out and buy these vehicles, or the fleet operators can do the same. We're doing a lot of support now to help. We have regulations that put light duty vehicles, transit vehicles, and medium and heavy duty trucks all need to start being 100% zero emission. So fuel cells or batteries, or a combination of both, to get there by 2030 to 45, depending on the application. And our role is really to make all this happen faster. Looking forward, what we're working on now, I mentioned we're transitioning from being California focused and becoming a national nonprofit by early next year. We're really working on scaling up this light duty market. There is right now more demand for these vehicles than we have infrastructure, so we need to scale up that infrastructure to match it. What's really exciting is we published a couple of years ago what we called the Fuel Cell Revolution, which looked at how to make that transition to a tipping point for that market. And our Air Resources Board here just released a report on the light duty market that it could be self-sufficient by 2030. I think this is the first identified ZEV path to self-sufficiency in the world. It's really exciting. And what that's important is, by achieving that light duty market, we see it lowering the cost, not just for that market, but bringing in hydrogen infrastructure and fuel cell technology costs for other applications and even other regions, because we know we are unique here in California in many ways, but we want to make it easier for everybody throughout the US, North America, and the world. And these are the opportunities to share these experiences. For the buses, again, we look at all transportation. We're trying to help that 100% transition by 2030 on their timeline. We're seeing more and more buses go this way because they're realizing the infrastructure requirements for 1,000 buses for battery charging can be very daunting, very challenging. And that's where the fuel cell application with hydrogen really excels. And then we've just published this truck vision document that looks at how we get it started and what we need. And it's not just California, because that market rapidly moves outside of the state. And we're already putting that team together to start development of a new roadmap and strategy document going forward to accelerate that progress. So that's a pretty quick overview of who we are, what we're doing, and where we're trying to go next. I look forward to the conversation, and thank you, Jane, again for the opportunity.
That was a fantastic overview. Thank you so much, Bill. Let me turn to Izumi Kai from JERA next.
Thank you very much for providing me this opportunity. So in this presentation, I'd like to briefly talk about JERA's business and the potential decarbonization pathways from power generation perspective, and also some key messages about the use of hydrogen for power generation. So next page, please. So this is about JERA's business model. So JERA is Japan's largest power producer, and we supply electricity to meet 30% of local Japan's electricity demand from our thermal power plants. So in Japanese fiscal year 2020, 82% of our electricity supply in Japan was from LNG power plants, which emits less carbon dioxide compared to generation from coal power plants. And JERA has been involved in energy value chain project development globally, including fuel procurement, thermal power generation, renewable energy development, fuel trading, electricity and gas sales, etc. And next page, please. So this is about potential decarbonization pathways from power generation perspective. So as Japan's largest power producer, so we have responsibility to supply reliable electricity for many decades to come. And in October 2020, JERA announced towards zero carbon dioxide emissions in 2050 to actively lead the way in realizing low carbon society. And there are many uncertainties around the use of hydrogen in power generation sector. But JERA has been taking multiple actions, both in Japan and the US, to achieve net zero CO2 emissions by 2050. And this graph shows potential decarbonization pathways around power generation. So since Japan has limited potential of renewable energy and natural gas and hydrogen production to meet our customers' significant electricity demand, so we will have to develop a cleaner fuel value chain globally. So you can see two numbers, number 1 and number 2. So number 1 is for coal power plants, we decided to shut down inefficient means supercritical or below coal-fired power plants by 2030. And also for relatively newer or efficient coal plants, we intend to gradually lower the use of coal volumes by replacing with ammonia, so that ultimately we can convert efficient coal power plants to zero emission 100% ammonia power plants by 2050. And number 2 is for gas power plants, there are multiple ways to decarbonize. So we can transport ammonia, or we can transport LOHC stands for liquid organic hydrogen carrier, one of the hydrogen carriers, or we may transport LNG or liquefied hydrogen as a carrier of hydrogen, and use the transported hydrogen for co-firing with natural gas, with an aim of achieving zero emission 100% hydrogen power plants by 2050. At this moment, we are not in a position to decide which technology is better than the other to achieve our goal, but we intend to demonstrate zero emission thermal power generation together with renewable energy development. Next page, please. So this is a kind of summary. So JERA is a leader in Japan in developing low carbon society. So it is very important for us to deliver sufficient, reliable, competitive, and cleaner energy to meet growing demand globally. And there are mainly 3 things about the technologies. One is solar wind power generation plus long duration storage. But again, this is the limited potential in Japan or some other Asian countries. So it is more important to pursue ammonia or hydrogen introduction. So blue ammonia or blue hydrogen plus CCS or CCUS, which is important for us and to be exported as a blue. But ultimately, it is also important to pursue green ammonia or green hydrogen produced outside of Japan and imported to Japan. So existing coal, gas, and coal-fired or gas-fired power plants around the world can use ammonia or hydrogen to lower CO2 emission significantly. And you can see the map lower right-hand side. So this means, since there is a vast potential of renewable development in the United States or some other countries like the Middle East or Australia, so I would expect to export US renewable electricity to Japan or other Asian countries as hydrogen or ammonia using competitive hydrogen carriers. So this is a summary of business and use of power generation, use of hydrogen for power generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Izumi. There are a lot of interesting stuff. I love to ask you a couple questions, but I guess I'll just wait until the moderated panel discussion portion of the program. Last but not least, Toru Sugiura, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Toru Sugiura from Toyota Tsusho America, Torrance, Los Angeles office. Toyota Tsusho is a trading arm of Toyota Group, so we don't manufacture automobile, just to clarify, but we provide services in not only automobile industries, but also other wide range of business field. Today, I would like to introduce our hydrogen value chain activities, as well as fuel cell port equipment and hydrogen supply demonstration project. Next, please. Our business model is the actual hydrogen value chain as a whole, as shown on the diagram, rather than separating just the one section of the chain. We operate hydrogen stations in Japan that is currently a challenging business model for economic viability by simply waiting for customers to come. So by making the whole value chain together as one business model, we try to create the supply and demand at the same time for self-sustainable supply chain. From upper stream to lower stream on that top diagram, left to right of the diagram, we invested a dairy farm cow manure-based renewable natural gas project as principal feedstock for our decentralized and demand-specific hydrogen production hub in Southern California and Los Angeles area. We are also developing new hydrogen distribution tool, hydrogen mobile refueler, as well as cost-effective hydrogen station in the area. Then for the target area of main hydrogen consumption, we are working with port equipment application for the conversion from diesel to hydrogen as substantial hydrogen usage and concentrated demand. We are hoping that the activities eventually supports many environmental project, policy, regulation, and incentive development as well. Next, please. So to be specific, we are starting to conduct a feasibility study and demonstration project at the Port of Los Angeles area. We are the recipient of several government incentives and grant program, and we'll be conducting demonstration projects starting next year. We will use our invested biogas, renewable natural gas from Central Valley, California, to produce renewable green hydrogen. Then we will use our state-of-the-art hydrogen mobile refueler that is basically a moving hydrogen station to the port area. So we bring the hydrogen to the port equipment. Then we are repowering one of the large port equipment top handler from diesel engine to fuel cell system to actually operate with hydrogen with normal duty cycle. When the demonstration is successful, we would like to expand the project to a larger equipment area, such as shown on the picture, RTG, rubber tire gantry crane, yard truck, as well as dryage trucks that are going in and out every day to the port area. Then eventually we would like to extend the project to other port area, not only the United States, but also globally. Next page, please. We have conducted extensive hearings from port terminal operators, particularly in Port of LA and Long Beach area. Port of LA and Long Beach together, they have 13 container handling terminals. And as you can see on the left side of the table, this is the inventory list for the port operation equipment. As you can see, many equipments working in the port area, almost 3,000 units working, and mainly they are operated by diesel fuel. After extensive hearings from the terminal operators, they have identified the red star items, equipment, which is shown on the bottom right side pictures, top handlers, RTG, rubber tire gantry crane, and the yard trucks, are likely to be favorable with fuel cell hydrogen technology over battery operation system. Port terminals have determined a very clear goal of zero emission goal. Equipment must be zero emission 100% by 2030, and dryage trucks that must be zero emission by 2035. As you can see on the bottom right side table and picture, those equipment has a potentially large hydrogen usage, 20 to up to maybe 60 kilograms per day. And so we focus on this target that demand will come soonest, and then the area is urgently need for better air quality. Next, please. However, there are many challenges to overcome for this technology transition from diesel to hydrogen in the port area. The first one is hardware commercialization by OEM. OEM must start developing hydrogen fuel cell equipment, and currently only the port area is the required, Port of Los Angeles area is the required area. So we work closely with the OEM to promote their development and also actual manufacture of the equipments. Number two, cost gap from current operation. As you can see that hydrogen, not only hydrogen fuel by itself, but also hardware and infrastructure is more expensive than diesel or gasoline operation system. So this is a big challenge for us, particularly after demonstration, how we can smoothly transit to mass production or commercialization of fuel cell hydrogen technology to the port area. That's a major challenge which we wanted to find out through our demonstration project. Number three, the regulation of adaptation. Also, this is very key factor for smooth transition technology transition to fuel cell hydrogen technology. Fueling protocol and fire code and permit, those are very critical area of this regulation adaptation. Currently, particularly fire code permit, very slow process. So we are working closely with the government and related authorities to speed up this regulation adaptation very quickly. Number four, lack of incentive support. Currently, passenger vehicles and some of the trucks, state incentive system is well established. However, port equipment and also maybe port equipment, hydrogen production has not enough incentives and grant programs. So again, we're also working with local authorities and state government and also federal government to beef up this incentive support. With this, definitely this hydrogen society can be accelerated for more expansion. Lastly, the user education and training. A lot of people think that as soon as they hear the word of hydrogen, it's kind of dangerous material. It is actually quite a safe fuel. And so we need to make sure that we can educate the public and also the user of the hydrogen equipment well, so that hydrogen is considered safe and a very useful new fuel. So lastly, collaboration by all stakeholders is a key successful transition to zero emission. So Toyota Tsusho will continuously working on this project and try to collaborate with all stakeholders to accelerate this hydrogen society for the expansion. Thank you very much for your audience.
Thank you so much, Toru. That was an excellent presentation as well. We're starting to get quite a few questions in the Q&A box, but anyone who has not yet done so, feel free, participants, feel free to start sending in your questions, and I will collect them and try to ask as many of those questions during the audience Q&A section. But let me move now to the moderated sort of a panel discussion portion. I have so many questions. I mean, these are really extremely helpful sort of pictures of what each of you have been working on and how you see some of the, how the sort of pathway towards scaling up hydrogen usage in your respective end use sectors. But first, let me start with Bill. So, here in Washington, we've been spending a lot of time looking at what's happening on the Hill. The Congress has been looking at a lot of ways to decarbonize the economy, and when it comes to transportation sector, there's been a lot of attention on EV, battery electric vehicles. And I wanted to get your thought as to how you see, I guess, area of the scope for a fuel cell vehicle expansion, and where it would make sense to have fuel cell vehicles over batteries, whether it's sector specific, or I'm sorry, whether it's the class of vehicles, or if it's type of environment. I'd love to get your thought.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for full disclosure, I started in batteries over 20 years ago. So that was my more origination into this space. I think what we're going to see is hydrogen and electricity are two energy carriers. And as we try to decarbonize and move to renewables, we need both of them because they both have strengths and weaknesses that actually match each other. And just like neither diesel nor gasoline dominated everything in either market, but they found where they worked best, I think we're going to find that generally in transportation, especially. And I don't think it's out of place to say the heavier applications will clearly play with the advantages of hydrogen more, where batteries can be, for weight alone, be one of the disadvantages. But at this and in the light duty, especially in the urban communities, we will see more battery vehicles because they don't go as many miles, and that's really nice niche for them. But I also think there'll be a lot of overlap. When you look in just the light duty market, for example, you'll see that taxis and fleets with high mileages, or that can't sit and charge for hours, or fuel cells will have a great play there. And likewise, some of the heavy duty applications, even in the ports, there are gantry cranes and things that can go battery or electricity. And that's a great application. So I think it's going to be interesting to see where the two play out over time. And I think it's not just about the vehicle or the use. I think the other place I would go with these are hydrogen electricity as energy carriers. When you look at the grid, how hydrogen can be a storage and a durability or resilience opportunity for the grid to be stronger. You can get more renewables out, and in the surplus times, instead of seeing that energy go to waste, you can make hydrogen and sell it off to other applications for revenue streams. I think those two in not just transportation, but power are going to be very intriguing to see it play out. And then the other I would say is really when you look at that play out, a question I saw earlier was about the costs. We're seeing in the transit world really something that I've said for years is batteries are much easier up front, and the challenge gets harder as you succeed and put more of those cars into play. And fuel cells are the opposite. For batteries, I could change my car overnight and maybe make some minor modifications to my home. That's a minor issue. When half of my neighbors do this, then the transformer in the neighborhood starts to be a challenge. And upstream towards the production and distribution, there might be impacts. When everyone switches to batteries, now even the wires into our neighborhood aren't sufficient. I would even add that if you're building everything on the utility system for your infrastructure, there's no competition there. And I'm not sure about that business model. I think they can do it, but our current system, at least in the US, will come to odds with that. On the other end, you've got to create for one hydrogen vehicle, I need new production, distribution, and dispensing. So it all has to happen up front. But once I get half my neighbors to do it, now there's a nice business model. When everybody goes hydrogen, what we are seeing around the world are business models that work at scale. And so again, neither of them solves all of our challenges. And I think we're going to see a ZEV world grow up and find that pro and con for the two. I think it's going to be a really interesting mix when we see electricity and hydrogen as energy carriers integrate into an energy economy.
That's actually fascinating. I've never really thought about the sort of I don't want to say trade-off, but different strengths of fuel cell vehicles and battery EVs, the way that you just described. And certainly, the way in which that we're still sort of struggling to modernize our, grid system here in this country, at least, makes you wonder perhaps, there's still, benefit to pursuing multiple options, if you will. Certainly in countries like China and Germany, they've been going pretty strong, after the battery EVs, certainly in the passenger vehicles. And I think at least, China has been quite active in developing, high voltage, very modern grid systems, certainly in the highly, populated areas. But yeah, no, I think it really, it requires a lot of different pieces up front. And yeah, no, that was a very valuable insight. And within the United States, and you earlier noted that your organization is going national. By the way, congratulations, that's very exciting. And I wanted to sort of get your thought as because fuel cell vehicle is the non-stationary application of hydrogen. And it requires both the fleet, but then also, as you mentioned, charging station, the infrastructure side as well, right? And as the fuel cell vehicle is to expand within the United States, would there be more of a sort of an economy of scale gain, or are there also potentially some of the challenges that may arise in terms of coordinating all these different types of stakeholders and including regulators and perhaps even, I don't know how the insurance and all these, some of the private sector non-manufacturer, I guess entities may, factor in this ecosystem, if you will.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a great answer for that, but I think I can highlight how our organization has been changing for that kind of question. We started really with our government vehicle and primarily light duty vehicle and energy providers at the beginning, because they were the core players to see if we could do it, and if so, how. As we've gotten into the retail market where real product are out there and average everyday people are buying and leasing vehicles and fueling them, we've started to see the rest of the supply chain and the issues come up. You mentioned insurance. We did deal a little bit with that in the early demonstrations, but now some insurance agencies are starting to look at this, and it's challenging for them, but they're figuring out what to do. We're now changing part of our organization, actively looking for, Toro-san and I go way back because I needed more supply chain support in his insights. And so we're looking at everything from dispenser, tape manufacturers to insurance companies, because we don't know all the impacts of what this is doing. And I think this is batteries or fuel cells, as we start to scale these up and succeed. What this means in real life is something that, no one of us is going to have all these answers. So collectively, and I would even say collectively around the world, each experience is drawing upon challenges and opportunities differently. So these opportunities that you're giving us can share more. And I think that's a long way of saying, I don't know all of these things yet, but we're trying to find them as we go. And if we can't solve them, ask around and maybe collectively trying to address them.
Thank you. No, I think that's really, I appreciate your very sort of frank response, because I think we're in a very early stage, and in many ways the demand still needs to come. Of course, the government, all these governments are still trying to figure out how best to approach. And of course, there are a lot of, technical challenges to be solved. So, I think if anything, if you say like you have all the, the answers, and then, but I definitely, appreciate your very thoughtful response here. And let me ask you, Izumi, about, more about, how this, hydrogen usage in power generation may look like. So you noted a couple interesting things. One is, eventually there's the export potential that may come from what you're working on right at the moment. There are a lot of countries around the world that are still quite dependent on coal. We just saw at the COP26 that a coal phase out or phase down is still a very contentious issue. But for the, I guess, foreseeable future, for those countries that are quite dependent on coal, is this where you see sort of more of a, I guess, business case in exporting some of your, expertise, but then some of your, perhaps, the equipment or operation abroad to help in both meeting some of the decarbonization, but then also energy security needs of these countries?
Thank you, Jane. So yes, so for long-term sustainable business perspective, so we believe the low carbon power generation makes lots of business sense. And ammonia as a carbon neutral hydrogen compound, so is attractive alternative due to its high energy density, and also high hydrogen storage capacity. And ammonia, as of now, can be easily stored and transported, and also converted into hydrogen fuel when required. And I think there need to be a combination of incentives or mandates or risk reduction policies, since energy transition requires significant new capital investment, and also the delivered fuel cost on the dollar per MMBTU basis will increase as decarbonized fuel replace traditional fossil fuels. So the financial burden of these early asset retirement or recapitalization of as an asset created especially challenging the financial risk. And unlike other highly developed countries, so Japan's or JERA's thermal generation fleet is relatively young, partly because of the 2011 nuclear disaster. So early retirement of some assets and recapitalization of other assets will have to take place much sooner than originally planned. So therefore, we need the proper government support mechanism will be essential. And also ultimately, the additional cost may need to be spread out over time to the ratepayers. And in terms of the coal kind of co-firing in developing countries, so basically the thermal efficiency of even the best high pressure steam boiler plants, that's coal plants, is around 20% lower than the best the CCGT plants, which is a combined cycle. And the CO2 emissions of these plants will increasingly cost money as carbon emissions are financially penalized at some point in the future. So all the coal and the oil plants that use high pressure steam boilers and steam turbines will be retired and replaced with much more energy efficient combined cycle gas turbine. So we believe that the use of green hydrogen, green ammonia provides an option for developing countries not only to reduce emissions, but also use their own natural resources such as wind power or solar power, etc., for hydrogen production and reducing reliance on imported energy sources. And some other point is, so by 2030, I understand around 1,200 gigawatt of coal power plants worldwide that are currently in operation or under construction could not only still be in service, but could also still have a remaining life of at least 20 years or so. So phasing out these coal plants in the near future would result in heavy financial losses to the owners, particularly in the developing countries. So, with many governments and international financial institutions discontinuing financing new coal-based power plants, so co-firing with ammonia provides an opportunity to improve the environmental performance of the existing coal-fired power plants in developing countries, while addressing some political needs of the host governments where jobs in coal industry are very important. So that's my the basic understanding. And if any other question, did you?
No, that was excellent. No, I'm glad that you did cover the question related
Yeah.
to the capital stock turnover, because there's actually an excellent question from the audience about that. And I wanted to actually ask both you and also Toru later about, because Toru also mentioned, the existing, what to do with the existing equipment, or, the need to convert being one of the hurdles, not necessarily game stopper, showstopper, but it's one of the things that you need to work on as a business, business stakeholder. So no, I'm glad. And then let me there's actually really also a really interesting question from the audience that really goes really well with what I also wanted to ask you, Izumi. That is, you did mention a little bit about the role of US LNG. Of course, you're a major player in the global LNG market. So how does, what's the linkage between JERA's, hydrogen related or ammonia, coal, ammonia power generation business in Japan, and and your existing presence as LNG supplier, and particularly as it relates to US LNG export capacity.
Okay, so as I showed the technology decarbonization pathways in the previous presentation, so we believe importance of LNG will remain, and in developing countries, it will be more important as their gas demand or LNG demand will increase next 2 or 3 decades. So therefore, not only supplying to Japan, but also to Asian countries, we really want to contribute to supplying cleaner fuel LNG, so that they can convert from oil or coal power plants to LNG power plants. Of course, renewable energy development is important, but we need to take multiple options in order to maintain the sizable power generation, because energy density is totally different, and it takes time to expand the renewable energy, completely replacing the fuel power plants. But having said that, as I mentioned earlier, so it is important to lower carbon emission from LNG power plants. So therefore, what we propose, zero emission thermal. So that is, in the case of coal, ultimately we intend to achieve zero emission, from coal power plant to 100% ammonia power plant. So this transition will enable us to the zero emission while maintaining the significant amount of energy supply stably, utilizing the existing power plants. And for the LNG, the gas power plants, so our intention is to co-fire hydrogen, could be starting from blue hydrogen or green hydrogen, and gradually increasing the co-firing ratio, so that same like ammonia power plant at coal power plant, we intend to achieve 100% hydrogen power plant. So converting from gas power plant to hydrogen power plant. But it takes 20 years or so to achieve such the full replacement. But without taking actions to advance technologies to enable such co-firing, it is very difficult to be responsible for the stable energy supply and also competitive, cost competitive energy supply. So practical aspect as well as achieving the challenging goal. So we are trying to strike the balance and try to lead this kind of activities in Japan as well as outside of Japan. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Izumi.
Thank you.
Now, Toru, thank you again for the really great presentation. And I think there are a lot of different pieces to be explored there, but I think one of the ways when I think of port operation, there is sort of a, I guess, cluster of demand that you have, and it's also perhaps closer to some of the hydrogen supply, if they're to be shipped in. so it, in a way, has its own sort of a universe or ecosystem or supply chains. What are, and so I wanted to get your thought on, what are the strengths of that model, and in particular, like as a lot of industrial users want to replicate the hydrogen usage on much more of a standalone environment. What are the pieces that they really must have, and what are perhaps even the sequence in which that they should approach?
Thank you, Jan. That's a great question. Yes, particularly the port equipment hydrogen supply, self-sustainability is the key for a hydrogen supply system. And currently, passenger vehicle area, industrial gas companies supplying hydrogen to all hydrogen station networks. However, once the centralized hydrogen supply is disrupted, everybody underneath of the umbrella suffers. So in a port area, as you know, the congestion of the container movement right now, particularly, there's no hydrogen shortage concept is acceptable. So our focus is not only our focus, but to supply hydrogen to the port area particularly. We need to develop and establish a self-sustainable hydrogen supply ecosystem channel that is self-sustainable. So we are focusing on local production and local use concept. So we use locally available biogas for green hydrogen feedstock, and then we try to produce hydrogen locally near the demand area, which is very, very close to the port area. And it's demand specific. So our hydrogen is totally dedicated to very specific demand, which is a port equipment. So, the hydrogen can be supplied to different area, different field, but I think to risk mitigation, this type of self-sustainable decentralized system is also one of the important solutions that we should all consider. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I guess in the interest of time, we have about 7 minutes left. I'm already starting to incorporate some of the audience questions into my own questions, but one of the questions that came in is about, how would carbon pricing affect hydrogen economy development or scaling up hydrogen use in all these sectors each of you are working on. So it's for all three of you, but let me start with Bill. If you could add any insight or share your thought on this, that'd be great.
I really like the idea of carbon pricing because that's what we're trying to do, decarbonize the systems. It's not about electrification, it's not about hydrogen, it's about decarbonizing, and those two offer those opportunities. So I think especially a global carbon pricing could drive more hydrogen into development. And likewise, it would specifically impact, depending on where you place those levels, it would impact more 100% or wherever you put those numbers, the decarbonized or greener hydrogen. I don't like the color scale because hydrogen's clear and doesn't have a color. You're really trying to get at the carbon number, but I think that would be a super way to augment greater hydrogen opportunities. And likewise, I think it would also put all hydrogen use on a pathway to be further and further decarbonized under whatever timeline and numbers they set for a scale.
Izumi, do you have a thought?
Yeah, so we need some, especially Japan or Asian countries, which requires the importing low carbon fuel. It's important to have some kind of government support or some kind of a commercially viable mechanism. And the credible or verifiable carbon credit system is one of the key options. And with such a mechanism, more incentive will be created to pursue a more introduction of greener from blue or to green or even greener hydrogen or ammonia. So it is very important to personally believe such a mechanism introduction.
How about you, Toru? And particularly given the fact that you're, operating in California, but you probably also have a, insight from, coming from Japan, which I guess doesn't have carbon pricing, it does have global warming tax, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I think the carbon emission concept is important, but I think first, in order to make this hydrogen as a common fuel, I think it's very important that we start using hydrogen, whatever the color is concerned. And luckily, in the state of California, the recent Senate bill, SB 439, now redefined the color of hydrogen, and green hydrogen used to be only renewable electricity used by water electrolysis to make hydrogen was only considered green hydrogen, but now California recognized that biogas to hydrogen is also considered green hydrogen. So I think it's important that we start using this alternative zero emission fuel just to change the market, and then gradually we think about the carbon level and green level. So California, luckily, it's a well-established system, and so we would like to see a federal level same type of regulation and policy will continue. For example, currently, if you are a CNG station operator, you get two different renewable carbon credits. One is LCFS, low carbon fuel standard by California state. Another renewable credit is RIN, renewable identification number from federal level. However, if you run a hydrogen station, you currently can only apply LCFS California state credit. We don't get federal credit. So I think if federal also level this type of system, carbon credit system is awarded to hydrogen industry, I think hydrogen will become more common fuel. I think it's the important thing is try not to move from 100 to zero carbon emission. Like just to gradually move to towards zero emission is, I think, important just to start out.
And given this, oh yeah, sure, Bill, yeah, please jump in.
Toru-san brings up something I think very important. We really need to think about parallel pathways of getting the end use applications to be able to be that decarbonated pathway and the fuel production and pathways, meaning if we changed every car or vehicle, if we changed every heat pump and every stove to a zero emission opportunity, it doesn't necessarily mean that fuel, be it hydrogen or electricity, was decarbonized. And likewise, we need to think about, we need to decarbonize the fuel pathways and then get those. So we have to get and I'll use transportation, we need to get as many zero emission vehicles on the road as fast as possible. And we need to look at our fuel pathways and decarbonize those as quick as we can. And then those two run parallel and create the opportunity. So they are both connected yet separate. And so it's a really interesting thing that I think we often lose sight of is that you have to push on both of those around at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's
Absolutely,
excellent point.
absolutely agree. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and given all the investment that has already gone into the existing system, certainly it really does affect the pace. And then so the idea isn't necessarily to say, oh, just because you might be working on, I guess, blue hydrogen doesn't mean you're you're opposed to green. I think sometimes I think these sequencing and the scale of the investment points get probably underappreciated or lost in some of the conversations as we get overly focused on the end goal, which of course decarbonizing the economy is extremely important. But There's still a lot to cover, but I think it's almost, we're at the time. But let me quickly mention that we're planning another event with the cooperation of the Japan House LA, and probably January or February next year. And at that time, we will be focusing much more on the supply side, actually, transporting hydrogen and perhaps some of the production as well. So I hope many of you will come back and ask many questions as you did today. But last but not least, please join me in thanking this excellent panel of experts, speakers, as well as Yuko Kaifu from the Japan House. And but please stay tuned. CSIS Energy Program has a lot. We're looking quite a bit at hydrogen, but then also many other low carbon technology policies and pathways and strategies that are being rolled out, as well as a lot of industry efforts that are underway. So again, thank you everyone, and thank you to all the speakers.